climate change, global warming, whatever anybody preference to call it is increasingly a national security threat. It is increasingly going to provide major challenges to food security, to water security, to refugee populations, which it's going to create, to the stability and instability of countries, to economies.
I do not believe that human activity is causing these dramatic changes to our climate the way these scientists are portraying it.
Is climate change a fact? Mr. Harris?
No.
Ms. Grant?
No.
Mr. Brandon?
No, God can cause a climate.
Mr. Tillis?
No.
What is global warming? Here in America, global warming can mean a lot of things. To some, it's an enormous threat to our way of life. To other people, it's a scam, serving only to trick the American people. Even those who agree that global warming is an observable phenomenon can't all agree on whether or not we humans have any substantial effect on it. Global warming has come to have so many meanings in our modern day that we call it by a few different names, such as climate change. In fact, about 63% of Americans believe that global warming is happening. Though the number of Americans that disbelieve global warming is lower, at 23%, it's been on the rise, increasing by 7% between April and November of 2013. And still, there's no telling how many of the 63% that do believe in global warming believe we are at least partially causing it. Now, before we get into the politics of climate change and ultimately take a side, let's talk about the science. The basic idea of the greenhouse effect is relatively simple. Power plants predominantly rely on coal and other non-renewable resources to generate electricity. Consequently, these plants produce carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. Meanwhile, light from the sun warms our planet, some of it being absorbed and some of it reflected. However, light from the sun starts in the visible spectrum, but after being absorbed and released in the infrared, it can be absorbed again and sent back to Earth by greenhouse gases. As greenhouse gases accumulate in our atmosphere, less and less light escapes the Earth, making it hotter and hotter. This leads to what we call feedbacks. In other words, as the Earth gets hotter and hotter, it gets hotter faster and faster. For example, as the ice melts, less of the light from the sun is reflected by the ice, meaning more is absorbed, and the Earth gets even hotter. As global warming reaches new, hotter extremes, the ice caps melt, causing the global sea level to rise. This can potentially be disastrous, not only for world powers and developed countries like the US, but for small, developing or undeveloped nations who played no part in global warming. At least, that's what the science says. But is the science really in? Climate change deniers would tell you no. They would tell you not all of the scientists can agree that climate change is happening. But what are the actual numbers? 97%. 97% of scientists believe climate change is happening. Is 3% really enough to cast reasonable doubt on the whole movement?
97% of some of the liberal scientists polled believe that humans are doing this. This is not settled science. Just like perhaps many of those same scientists, 97% perhaps, believe there is no God. But they don't know. There's no science on that. So scientists, like the rest of us humans, can have beliefs, but that doesn't make it science.
From a scientific perspective, it would appear that we are indeed edging off of the proverbial cliff that is global warming. But deniers also point out that water, a natural component of our atmosphere, is also a greenhouse gas. This is true. However, the heat of Earth has really seen its largest and fastest increase since the Industrial Revolution, when we really started relying on coal and other non-renewable resources. But water vapor has always been in our atmosphere. We could assume that water vapor and the subsequent greenhouse effect it causes are necessary to keeping Earth at a reasonable temperature. So the carbon we add to the atmosphere pushes us over the necessary threshold. You could say it's too much of a good thing. It's the difference between cranking up the heat in the winter and setting yourself on fire. Furthermore, the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere changes wildly in short periods of time and serves to amplify the effects of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Another argument against the existence of global warming that you might hear often is that the general trend in terms of heat over land and sea surfaces has been going down for around 17 years. This is true. However, that's when you only look at those last 17 years. Though heat trends may decrease in the short term, on the whole they're still on the rise. In fact, 2014 was the hottest year on record. At this point, hopefully it's clear that global warming is happening, is caused by humans, and is a threat to So, what steps are being taken to combat this impending threat? Here in America, we value one thing above all else: freedom. And rightly so, it's a natural right of all living people. But our love of freedom, and particularly of the free market, is often at ends with our efforts to combat global warming. Cap and trade, for example, revolves around the idea of capping the amount of carbon or other pollutants that our economy can produce. It would go about this by creating and giving out to carbon-producing businesses permits to pollute. Every year we produce less and less of these until we have weaned off of non-renewables entirely. Meanwhile, the carbon tax would simply tax businesses for the carbon they produce. This would nudge non-renewables out of the realm of cheap availability, hopefully making renewables a more viable route for power generation. A businessman in the coal industry, particularly one who doesn't believe in global warming to begin with, isn't likely to go along with the new regulations such as cap and trade or the carbon tax because they hurt his business. He might fire back from a moral standpoint, arguing that we compromise the free market if we regulate carbon, or that it could put him out of business and therefore all of the men and women he employs. It's a sad fact that we need to start moving away from non-renewable resources, and this will mean the dissolution of thousands of jobs. However, it will also pave the way for thousands more jobs in the renewable energy power production business. It's true, the cost of fighting global warming is high, but what about the cost of not fighting it? At the end of the day, global warming is happening, but we aren't powerless. We can all make sacrifices, cut emissions, and save our planet.
It has been said that every great emergent scientific truth goes through three phases. First, people say it can't be true. Second, they say it conflicts with the Bible. Third, they say it's true all along.
Right.
And so there you have it. The evidence will show up when they need more evidence, more storms, more coastlines getting lost, people beginning to lose their wealth. People, if they begin to lose their wealth, they change their mind real fast, I've found, particularly in a capitalist culture. So I think that's what will happen. By the way, no matter what happens in climate change, our species will still be here. It's just that the thousands of years over which we created our civilization took place over a kind of climate that we are exiting right now, a climate range that we're exiting. And we are responsible